For years, the name Yaman echoed across Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. He wasn't just a Turkish actor anymore, he was an international sensation, a man who carried both the weight of stardom and the burden of relentless speculation. But then, almost overnight, silence. After a career built on intensity, passion, and headlines that spread like wildfire, Yaman disappeared from the spotlight. Fans asked, what happened? Why did he retreat? Rumors spread like wildfire, some claimed heartbreak, others whispered about exhaustion, while a few even believed he had sworn off the industry altogether. Yet none of them had the real answer. Until now. The world waited, sometimes impatiently, sometimes with quiet hope, for Can to return, not just as the actor who had captivated millions, but as the man behind the roles. And finally, after years of silence, he broke it. His first interview is more than just words, it's a revelation. Sitting down in front of the cameras again, his presence carried both the confidence of the superstar and the vulnerability of someone who had lived through storms the world had only guessed at. The interviewer's first question cut straight to the point, where have you been, Can? Why did you vanish when the world needed you the most? For a moment, silence lingered in the air. His deep gaze shifted downward, and his lips pressed together as if struggling to hold back years of untold truths. Then, with a heavy sigh, he began. I wasn't ready. The fame, the expectations, the noise, it was too much. I needed to disappear, not because I didn't care, but because I needed to survive. These words landed like thunder. Fans across the globe, who had constructed endless theories about his absence, suddenly found themselves face to face with the raw honesty of their idol. Yaman wasn't running away from his audience, he was saving himself from the crushing weight of fame. This was only the beginning, and every word promised that what was coming next would shake the world even more. As the cameras kept rolling, Yaman leaned back in his chair, his voice steady but carrying the weight of years unspoken. People think fame is a blessing, he said, his tone sharp but pained, but when it comes too fast, it can swallow you whole. Every move you make, every word you say, every person you meet, suddenly, it's no longer yours. It belongs to the world. The interviewer nodded, but Can's words didn't need validation. They already carried the truth fans had been waiting to hear. He spoke of the chaos that had followed his rapid rise to international stardom, how the paparazzi chased him through the streets of Rome, how tabloids fabricated stories about love affairs, feuds, and scandals, how every smile he gave was interpreted as a declaration, and every silence as guilt. Then came the subject everyone had been waiting for, the relationships, the rumors, and the one question that had haunted him the most. His silence regarding Demet Özdemir. For years, fans had tied their names together as if fate itself had written their story. On-screen chemistry had spilled over into off-screen speculation, and when Can disappeared, so did the hope of answers. The interviewer carefully asked, and what about Demet? People still talk about you too, even after all these years. Did your silence have anything to do with her? For a brief moment, the atmosphere changed. His eyes, usually sharp and unshakable, softened. He paused, his fingers interlocked as if holding back emotions he had promised himself not to show. Finally, he whispered, some stories are too beautiful, too fragile, to survive under the weight of the spotlight. What we had was real, but it wasn't meant to be exposed, dissected, and judged by millions. That sentence hit harder than any scandalous headline ever could. In those few words, Can confirmed what fans had always suspected but never truly knew, that behind the cameras, behind the gossip, there was something genuine between him and Demet. Something that had been drowned by fame's noise. The world was stunned, not because he admitted to feelings, but because he finally spoke about them, after years of silence. His honesty wasn't the confession of a star, it was the revelation of a man who had loved, lost, and learned that silence sometimes speaks louder than words. And yet, this was only the second chapter of his revelation. The audience could sense it, he hadn't told everything. There was more beneath the surface, more that had been hidden away during the years of absence. The interview room was silent, as if every person present knew they were witnessing history. Yaman wasn't just giving an interview, he was peeling back layers of himself that had been hidden for far too long. He took a slow breath before continuing, his voice calmer now but filled with emotion. "I had to learn to be alone," he admitted. "When you live in the spotlight, you're never truly alone, but you're always lonely. I needed to disappear to find out who I really was without the cameras, without the applause, without the noise." The world had always seen Ken as the untouchable superstar, the man with unshakable confidence, the heartbreaker, the celebrity who seemed larger than life. But now, in front of millions, he was confessing that behind the image was a man who struggled, who doubted, who needed silence to heal. The interviewer leaned forward, "But why stay quiet for so long? Fans waited for years, hoping you'd speak." Ken's answer was simple, yet devastating. "Because I wasn't ready. Every time I thought about speaking, I realized I didn't have the strength to be honest. And if I couldn't be honest, then silence was better." It was a statement that resonated far beyond fame. For his fans, it was a reminder that even their idol was human, carrying wounds that needed time to close. But then came the question that made the air heavy once again. "Did you regret it? Walking away, leaving everything behind?" Ken's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, though his eyes betrayed a deep sadness. "Regret? No. Pain? Yes. I lost opportunities, I lost people, I lost time. But I gained something more important, myself. I realized that love, success, even friendship, none of it matters if you lose who you are." His words cut through like a blade. It was a confession not of weakness, but of strength, the kind that comes only after surviving storms no one else can see. And yet, it was also an admission that his silence had cost him dearly. At that moment, the interviewer carefully brought up the one subject everyone had avoided for years, the betrayal rumors, the whispers of broken trust, the stories of nights that ended in tears rather than smiles. "Many believe your silence wasn't just about fame," the interviewer pressed, "but about something more personal. Was there a night, a moment, something that made you decide to walk away?" Ken's eyes darkened, his jaw clenched. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared into the distance, as if reliving a memory too painful to put into words. Finally, he murmured, "Yes. There was a night. And it changed everything. But some truths don't belong to me alone. They belong to both of us. And until the day comes when she chooses to tell her side, I will respect the silence we once promised each other." It was both a revelation and a mystery, confirming the existence of a night that had haunted fans for years, yet leaving them desperate for more. Ken had given the world a glimpse into his heart, but he still guarded the deepest wounds, proving that some secrets are too heavy to reveal, even now. As the interview moved toward its final moments, the atmosphere in the room shifted. There was a sense that Yaman had carried the audience as far as he could into his silence, but the weight of his truth was still pressing on him. The interviewer, careful not to push too far, asked the one question that had remained on everyone's mind: "What's next? After years of silence, after everything you've endured, where does Yaman go from here?" For a moment, he didn't answer. Instead, he exhaled deeply, as though shedding the last fragments of a burden he had carried for years. His eyes, still intense, lit up with a new kind of fire, one that fans hadn't seen in a long time. "I go forward," he finally said. "I can't erase the past. I can't rewrite what happened. But I can choose what happens tomorrow. And tomorrow, I want to live, not for the headlines, not for the cameras, but for myself." It was a powerful statement, one that redefined the image of the superstar the world thought they knew. This wasn't the Yaman who had once been portrayed as untouchable, reckless, or consumed by fame. This was a man who had walked through fire and emerged with scars that told his story louder than any script ever could. Then, almost unexpectedly, he spoke of hope. "Silence was my shield, but it doesn't have to be my prison anymore. I've learned that sharing your truth doesn't make you weaker, it makes you free. And if my words today give even one person the courage to face their own silence, then breaking mine was worth it." The audience watching from their homes felt every syllable. Across continents, fans who had waited years for answers found themselves not just hearing Yaman's story, but seeing their own reflections in his struggles. His confession wasn't just about fame, heartbreak, or loss, it was about being human. As the camera switched off and the interview came to an end, the silence that had once defined Yaman no longer felt like absence, it felt like completion. For years, he had been the subject of endless speculation, countless rumors, and unanswered questions. Now, for the first time, the world finally understood, his silence wasn't abandonment, it was survival. Yaman stood up, shook hands with the interviewer, and before leaving, offered one last thought that would echo across headlines worldwide. Don't believe silence means nothing is happening. Sometimes, silence is where the biggest battles are fought, and where the strongest truths are born. With that, he walked away, not as the mystery fans had chased for years, but as a man who had faced his shadows and chosen to step back into the light. The world was stunned, not because of scandal, not because of gossip, but because Yaman had shown that true strength lies in vulnerability, and true fame isn't about being seen, it's about being understood. And after years of waiting, the truth was finally revealed.